I had Mr. Bennett from Union City say that he planned to watch the YouTube video of the meeting.
Okay.
Jeff, Mr. Bennett just texted me and says he can't get on.
Yeah,
Mr. Bennett from Union City say that he planned to watch the YouTube video of the meeting.
and I just got the YouTube meeting live.
Mr. Bennett just texted me and says he can't get on.
Got a delay there somewhere.
No, get replay, Jeff.
Tell him to look in the lower left-hand corner of his screen. There might be a tab there he has to click.
The link to the YouTube is on our website, and it wasn't working, or it wasn't live, but it is live now. So that's ready to go. And I'm going to start the recording now, and we can get on with the meeting.
Was there any other preliminary information you wanted to give anybody, Jeff?
Absolutely. So we discussed the microphone. Terry briefly discussed the camera. When it comes to voting, the camera needs to remain on while voting, and we're encouraging you to leave the camera on for the duration of the meeting. I think that it makes the live broadcast a lot more previewable, as well as keeps the meeting moving. In terms of the setup of the meeting, the only people that are in this meeting are the Erie County Technical School Administration, Mr. Sennett, the solicitor, Dr. Walker, the director, and the board members, those of which we'll get through and roll call here in a minute. Everybody else that is attending this meeting is going to be previewing the meeting on YouTube Live, or they've joined the webinar as an attendee. They're muted. They don't have an opportunity to turn a camera on. And the only way that they can participate in the meeting is if a board member requests for them to speak, and then I can turn their microphones on. I have that control, and Terry, the board secretary, has that control. So this is a public meeting. It is being broadcast, and I appreciate everybody working with the technology and being here and adjusting your lighting so that you all look well. That's the goal of this meeting, is to be able to do this digitally. So with that, I can turn it over to Terry.
Good evening, everybody. We'd like to begin. Mr. Ring, did you want to call the meeting to order, or would you like me to do that?
I can call the meeting to order. Let's have a moment of reflection. All right, and Jeff has his screen on, so we have a flag, so we can do our flag salute. You can stand or however you want to do it. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
United States of America,
the Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and
and justice for all.
Hold on.
This is Stephen O'Donnell. Can I ask a quick question before we get?
Sure, go ahead.
In our school board meeting, we had to start both the work session and the school board meeting by voting the acceptance that we were going to have our meeting remotely and virtually. Are we doing that?
Yes, if you have an agenda in front of you, we're going to do roll call, and then we're going to get to that motion.
I have it in front of me. I didn't see it. Thanks.
Yep.
I'd like to start the roll call now, please. Mr. Mahoney.
Here.
Mr. Dinsmore.
Here.
Mr. Buxby.
Here.
Mr. Osnanek.
Here. Did you hear me?
Mrs. Brink, I do not see her on yet. Mr. Rickroad.
Here.
Mr. DePlacido.
Here.
Mr. Francilla, I do not see. Mr. Ring.
Here.
Mr. Gilbert.
Here.
And Mr. O'Donnell.
Here.
The
Very
next,
good. So we have 9 members. Did I count correctly?
yes, you are correct.
Very good. So that takes us to the motion. Do you want to talk about that motion before we make that, Terry?
Certainly. This is the motion that Mr. O'Donnell was expressing questions about. This is to change our policy in terms of the present policy states that you must all be present, and the policy appears to be physically present in the same area. So this policy is to try to allow for a forum such as this virtual session to be acceptable according to the board policies.
Okay, Terry, you're talking about the minute, agenda item 1D and E.
I believe it's just 1E. We've skipped 1D.
Correct.
Okay, so it's 1E.
Yes.
Okay, maybe it would be a good idea if we just repeated what the agenda number was as we move along through the list.
Right. I think we're doing motion found under 1E in order for the meeting to take place remotely, and then we'll go back to the agenda.
Good.
Can we project the agenda? And that way we can see the stuff we're talking about? And the
Jeff,
motion-
you want to take that one?
I can do that, but I believe as soon as I do that, it's going to take the entire live stream to just the agenda and no faces, just so we're clear.
I think that's okay. I think it's more important we see what we're talking about than looking at everyone's pretty face.
But every time you go for a motion, you have to have the faces.
You don't really. We did this in our other board meeting, and as long as you had the verbal approval or deny, that was adequate.
That's correct. We don't need to necessarily see everyone. All we have to do is, just like a phone call, we have to be able to call, everybody has to be able to hear everyone and be able to record the vote. And Terry's got to be able to record the vote by person. So we're going to do a lot of roll calls as opposed to voice votes
Who's talking?
on every motion.
Who's
Okay.
talking?
Mr.
I'm
Senate.
sorry, Tim Senate.
Oh, and you're just a blank page on my television.
That's correct.
Okay, then you, those who are not showing up on the Zoom, they should mention their name before they say anything so that we know it's them.
Very good.
Thank you, sir.
And I think that was why we, using the Pennsylvania School Board officials' recommendations, we're leaning towards keeping the videos active when you're speaking.
Yes, absolutely.
Jeff, is there a way that you can put that motion 1E up and then let people review it if they don't have it open on another computer, and then take it down
Absolutely.
and we'll vote?
Yeah, and Jeff, you're not showing up. Oh, wait a minute, just, okay, here we go.
The admin don't have their cameras on. So while you take a look and review that, would anybody like to make the motion? You need to state your name, please, if you'd like to make the motion.
Steve O'Donnell, I'd make the motion.
I'll
Is there a
second.
second?
Zalesnik.
Thank you. So I'll give you a minute or a second here to review this. Are there any questions or discussion?
The bold is the changes.
It's the approval of the agenda as amended, or approval of the policy as amended. The changes are in bold.
But the changes from the previous one we had is the bold?
Correct.
Okay,
That was Tim Senate, by the way.
thanks, Tim.
Any other questions or comments about this?
Yes, this is basically the same one. I looked at it, it's basically the same one all our school districts have received. Isn't that correct?
I believe it is a PSBA version of a policy. I can't say that all your school districts have the same policy. A lot of school districts don't require physical presence at all.
I just said similar.
Yeah, similar would be correct.
Any other comments? Hearing none. Terry, can you have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Mahoney,
I approve.
Mr. Dinsmore,
Yes.
Mr. Buxby,
Yes,
Mr. Olsnanik,
Come on, yes.
thank you. Mrs. Brink is not present. Mr. Rickroad,
Yes.
Mr. DePlacido,
Yes.
Mr. Cancilla is not present. Mr. Ring,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that carries 9-0, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right, then we'll go back to motion 1D, which is motion to approve the agenda. Is
So
there a
moved.
motion?
Jim Buxby moves.
Is there a second?
Dennis, second it.
Thank you. Any discussion, any additions that we need to make to the agenda? Hearing none, then we'll have a roll call vote for this again.
Mr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Dinsmore,
Yes.
Mr. Buxby,
Yes.
Mr. Olsnanek,
Yes.
Mrs. Brink is absent. Mr. Rickroad,
Yes.
Mr. DePlacido,
Yes.
Mr. Cancilla is absent. Mr. Ring,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. That passes. That takes us to 2, our meeting minutes, 2A. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of February 27th?
So
I'll
moved.
make the motion.
Steve O'Donnell, second.
So I think Gilbert had the first. Is that correct?
No, I had the first, Ed Rick Road.
Okay, Rickroad, thank you. Any discussion? Roll call vote, Terry. You're going to get your workout.
I am. Mr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Dinsmore,
Yes.
Mr. Buxby,
Yes.
Mr. Olsnanek,
Yes.
Mrs. Brink is absent. Mr. Rickroad,
Yes.
Mr. DePlacido,
Yes.
Mr. Cancilla is absent. Mr. Ring,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Thank you.
All righty. Is there any guest or public comment on items relating to the agenda? I don't know if it's Terry or Jeff that would know that.
We were not made aware of anyone wishing to address the JOC this evening.
Terry, is there, I'm sorry, Tim Sennett. Terry, is there any member of the public that can attend through this, or they have to be on YouTube?
There is a registration form on the website that could be completed if someone wanted to participate. And Jeff and I have been monitoring. It sends an email to our email boxes, and we have received no requests of that nature.
Currently, at this time, we have the special ed coordinator, Ms. Scalise. We have the superintendent of Union City, Mr. Bennett. We have our co-op coordinator, Mr. Eggleston, and our other special ed supervisor, Ms. Carr, attending the meeting, not as participants. They are the only ones that registered and attended. So they're in the room if you would like to address them.
Does anyone want to address the board? And I think the chat, if they're in here, they can chat or put their hand up or something like that Jeff would see. So
That's correct. And I do not have any questions or raised hands at the moment.
very good. So moving on to number 4, we got student accomplishments highlights. Do we have anything this evening?
Is Joe there?
Yes, I am.
You got anything to report, buddy?
We shared, I think, the March and April Student of the Month, which is now on your screen. Again, our faculty recognized that we could still do this through our enrichment and review. I'm sorry that the districts don't show. This was just something we put together recently. But again, I can get that back out to you to recognize the districts tomorrow when I'm in the office.
Thanks, Joe.
Steve O'Donnell here. Real quick before we move on. I know for our board, we had to come up with a sort of a pattern, what we wanted to, because we had a lot of people who were attendees. And so we ended up telling the attendees that if they had a question, they could put it in the Q&A, specifically the Q&A, and that way we could keep track of what was answered and what was not answered. I don't know if we want to come up with what our plan is to do that so that as we go forward, especially future meetings, people will know what to do. But Q&A made it possible to see the question and then also know that it was answered in the meeting if people wanted to review what was already answered. Just a thought.
In the this is Fred talking. In the PSBA training on Zoom and running these meetings and parliamentary process, the public comment is for the public to make statements to the board. It is not a forum for them to be asking questions. So that's where they would mail in these chat questions, and then we would take those questions offline and provide responses, as I understand it. But it's this meeting is not a forum for people to start asking questions of the board.
That this is Tim Sennett. That's correct. We're going to operate this meeting just like we would operate every other meeting. So members of the public had their opportunity to submit questions or make a comment under public comment. We will not entertain questions and answers during the meeting. And if questions are put in the chat, that'll be referred to the administration to respond to after the meeting, if they choose to do so.
Very good. Thank you. Let's move on to number 6, important items coming to ECTS. Is that you, Fred?
Yes, that would be me, Sam. I wanted to share with everyone an addendum to the communication I sent a couple of days ago. ECTS is moving to planned instruction on Monday. That is a big issue. Tim Sennett may want to address that, but the guidance that we've been provided by Pedro Rivera, Secretary of Education, is move forward now with mandatory planned instruction. Several of our most of our school districts are doing that, but my understanding is 2 of them at this point still are not making that transition as of Monday. So that's a big thing coming to the ECTS, and it's a big issue from the standpoint that, and Tim may need to jump in and elaborate here, but the letter of the law right now says that we would be in not a good position to move to planned instruction. There's some risk if someone wanted to challenge that. But virtually all of the school districts, or a very, very large percentage of them nationally, are moving this direction. So the theory and strategy is safety with numbers. Tim, I think you might want to make a comment here.
I would agree with you, Fred. We're going to follow the guidance. Everybody was supposed to have a continuity of education plan, which I know you have, and it's posted on the website, and everyone is moving forward with planned instruction if they're able to do so. As you indicated, there are a couple of districts that have technological issues or internet issues in the more remote areas, so therefore they have difficult time doing that. But that's an individual board determination or administration by each school district. But as far as the VOTEC goes, I think that you have your plan in place and you're going to start mandatory instruction on, did you just say Monday, Fred?
Yes.
And
yes.
I think that's the appropriate way to go at this point.
Okay, I got a question on that, Jim Buxby. Aldo told me a couple of times that our number of instruction hours exceed the number of mandatory instruction hours for some of our labs. And I'm just wondering if we could fall back on that, where we could say that they have met the requirement.
Well, the number of instruction hours has now been waived by the governor, so we're not worried about that.
Well, no, but if you took them off the list, it would be a little more frustrating to everybody else because they'd be done. And in particular, the seniors.
Well, like Jim, like I said, the governor has already waived those requirements, so we're not worried about number of hours or number of days.
Oh, so why are we going through this?
Because
to answer your question, Jim, Tim is absolutely correct about governor's waived the hours. but the hours that we document and we report to the state of Pennsylvania, even though we're above it, we're mandatory to meet that in a normal situation. So our 495 hours that we usually report, we would have to meet no matter what in a normal situation. That's what we've acknowledged.
Okay, but I heard that Wolf waived some of those requirements. Is that right?
That's correct.
So if he
As
waived the
Tim
requirements,
said, that those hours have been waived. So again, we're not concerned about it, but I was just addressing your question that in a normal situation, we would not be able to do that, even though we are above what the state requires.
okay, so why don't we follow Wolf's suggestion and
This is
waive the requirements for most of these classes and get them their diplomas and get them out of the school?
This is Fred. Jim, it is true the governor waived the hours requirement, but it's also true the Secretary of Education said move to plain instruction. That's why we're doing it.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
But this is the technical school rather than the classroom in the sending school. And they always have different requirements for each.
Not in this case, Jim. In this case, the guidance from the Department of Education and the guidance from the governor applies to the VOTEC, just like the technical school, just like it does the regular school. So the hours are waived, but the plan instruction, the continuity of education plan was required to be put in place by both the technical school and your home schools. So I believe everybody's in compliance.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that up because I remember Elda leaning on that a couple of times.
Good point, Jim. The other point, though, is that we've got to wind down the school year somehow. So this is a nice way to do it. Give some instruction here at the end. It's going to be challenging when you're used to, hands-on learning, and this is different. But everybody's having to adapt and work with it for now. So.
No, well, I got no problem with it. I just wanted to bring it up and find out if we were doing extra work.
Sure.
And apparently we're not doing extra work.
Right.
Sam,
Fred,
that's all I have for important items coming to ECTS right now. Remember that there'll be other things that are important to ECTS that we'll bring up later, but those are more in terms of procedural business that we have to transact in this meeting.
Sure.
Very good. That takes us to operations now. And if you want to look at your screen there, we've got a variety of motions under 7A, new business, and then we have 8, which is old business, including a whole bunch of policies under the 700 area. So if you want to review those now, if you have any question, well, we can make the motion to approve all of those is what would be the easiest here.
Motion to approve them all.
From
Steve O'Donnell.
Aren't we out of
Second.
sequence? Shouldn't we be up higher?
Is there a
Sorry?
second?
Aren't we considering 7A point I right now?
No.
We're considering 7 and 8 all the way down to the next red motion. We're going to take it all. We're going to make the motion, then we'll have any discussion all the way down to C there.
But item 7, 4 was it?
Oh,
Whoa.
I see that there's 2 8s. I'm sorry. So we're under 7 operations, new business, and then it probably should be 7B, old business, including the motions down to C to the motion. That's what I'm asking for. We have a first. Is there a second?
I'll second it. Add Rick Road.
Very good. Now let's, any discussion or questions on her, especially up under operations, you've got some motions there. Any questions on those, or are they self-explanatory? Hearing no discussion, I would ask for a roll call vote. Terry?
Dr. Walker, did you want to discuss the stormwater?
Yeah, that's not on the motion, Terry. We'll do that after the motion.
Sam, I'm sorry, Sam, I was on mute and I'd like to question item number 2 under new business.
To approve the consulting contract with
Yeah,
nutrition.
is that something new?
I
No,
don't
that's
believe so, but I think Terry can speak to that.
correct. That is not new. When we disbanded the cafeteria operations, we entered a contract with the nutrition group to do events and provide food service for anything that was going on at the school, such as your JOC meetings, principals meetings, things of that nature. So this is just a renewal for the
Okay,
year of the existing contract.
okay, I was reading their thing on the reports, and they never really listed, or maybe we don't know, or maybe we do know what exactly. They just said a huge cost savings. Did they ever put a figure to it?
Part of the contract that we have with them also enables our culinary arts program to utilize their food purchasing discounts, which we cannot obtain the same type of discounts as they can for our program, because we would just be purchasing only for that culinary art program. It becomes very difficult to get any significant discounts offered to us because our buying power is not large enough. So yes, we do see quite a savings in terms of utilizing in the instructional programs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions about anything on the, that we're getting ready to vote on?
Sam, also on item 4, discussion of the stormwater thing.
I think we're going to come back to that as soon as we move the motions.
Well, I thought we had a motion to vote on all 4 of them.
No,
Well,
just three.
Item number 4 does not have a motion attached to it, so therefore it's just a discussion item. And it's all, so the motion is for everything under those 2 categories except for item number 4, which will be handled after we take action.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Terry. Let's call the roll.
Thank you. Mr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Dinsmore,
Yes.
Mr. Buxby,
Yes.
Mr. Osnanek,
My mute is having problems, but I'm unmuted now. Yes.
thank you. Mrs. Brink is absent. Mr. Rickroad,
Yes.
Mr. DePlacido,
Yes.
Mr. Cancel is also absent. Mr. Ring,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. So that passes 9. Now we can go back and have the discussion regarding the stormwater. Fred, is that you?
Yes, I'll start that conversation. Just prior to the school closures, the Facilities Renovation Committee had a meeting with Chris Coughlin to check status and in general provide information about the project. At that meeting, Chris said that he needed to have 2 additional pieces of work done. One was geotechnical sampling that would inform the design work so that he could continue his planning, his design, and there needed to be a stormwater management plan generated. In that meeting, Chris indicated that price tag was going to be about $5,000. And so we asked Chris then to get us some estimates. And I brought that to the JOC as an information item at our last meeting, which remember was 2 months ago now. And so the estimates and the proposals just arrived within the last week, and I sent those out to everybody. The estimates are for between $30,000 and $50,000. And the difficulty with that is when I brought this to the JOC, the consensus was if we need $5,000 or we need $10,000, we've got to get this work done. Just let's move forward with it. Now the 5 or 10 has turned into 30 to 50. And I have not had an opportunity to get responses back from the the renovation committee. So that's why I'm bringing it here for general information and a discussion. I have since pushed back on Chris and talked with him and about 2 points. One of those points was, do we need to do this work right now to facilitate your design? And the answer is yes. The second question that I posed to Chris was, is this included in your contract of $675? And the response is no. This is going to have to be handled as separate contracts with different companies and not part of his bill. Well, that creates a couple of difficulties. One, I'm wondering, why was this not identified early on in the discussion? This seems like a late minute arrival. And second of all, $5,000 or $10,000 might be one thing, but in terms of a path forward, if we have to come up with another 30 to 50, I'm concerned, after talking with Terry, we may need to bring this back to the school districts for approval in their school boards. That starts the conversation. That's the framing context. That's where we're at right now. Take any questions.
Fred, Tim said it. I just wondered what the scope of the stormwater and geotechnical requirements are. Are they as a result of an addition to the project? I'm not really clear as to what the project is, because I don't think Chris has ever showed us what the project is. But if they're related to an addition, then I would understand that. But if it's not related to the addition, why do we need a stormwater plan for renovation to a building in Summit Township?
Well, that's a great point, Tim. And the project well, first, Chris has presented the project in terms of working toward a projected value not to exceed 32.5 million. And consequently, he has come up with that preliminary design that does include new construction. That question was not asked specifically if the geotechnical core samples were required to new construction, and nor was the stormwater, because we've never talked about going forward with this project without new construction. So that would be a game-changing conversation that would impact the design if we're not going to have any new construction. We could
Well, I got a question on that. I really don't want to do anything with regard to stormwater until the state tells us what they're going to do with the chicken circle, because that's going to add stormwater to our areas probably.
Tim, you're going to have to respond to that one.
Yeah, well, I don't know if they go hand in hand, Jim. And I don't know what the stormwater plan is for the street. I assume that the stormwater plan will be ditches along the road or piping along the road surface. Fred and I both have reached out to PennDOT in regard to their final design because we received a report that referenced that the design was near final. And we did get a response from the person who we had contacted and who made a presentation on behalf of PennDOT. He indicated that it was not final, didn't have anything to share with us at the present time. We inquired about value for that project. And again, he said he didn't have information for us at the present time. So we're kind of still on hold waiting for them. I don't know when that's going to result in giving us information, which probably would include the stormwater plan, Jim. But ultimately, if, as Fred indicated, if the stormwater plan is necessary for the addition to the facility, then Chris Coughlin will be responsible for coordinating the stormwater plan with the PennDOT plan and providing us an overall picture.
Well, it would be nice if we knew what their stormwater plan was, so maybe we could just expand their plan to take care of our plan.
Jim, this is Fred. I might need to ask Dell to jump online here, but in the original design work that we saw, the proposals for it, there was a lot of conversation that they need to put in a retaining pond. on the, let me see, that would be the east side of Hammett Road and to the north of Oliver Road on that little corner. And it was wetland anyway, so they were gonna make that a retaining pond. But if they're gonna annex our land or take it, I don't see how they can then force us to prepare a stormwater plan to accommodate their construction.
Well, that's kind of my point in the whole thing.
Yeah,
Well, we
but
don't know what they're gonna do, so we could be wasting money.
There's always been a need for stormwater and the geotechnical stuff. There's always been part of the plan to add to the buildings, add to our building up there. So therefore, it becomes necessary. I think that whatever happens with the state is going to happen with the state, and Chris is going to have to take that into account when he gets this done. And he knows that, and he should be aware of that, obviously, and that it has to happen that way. So it's good. It's just got to be part of the design. That's all it is. But one question I have is Chris really working on it right now?
That's a good question. I agree with that.
I haven't seen, I've heard that he's not working, and I understand he's not in the office, but there are a lot of different places that are working at home, doing this, doing that. And if he truly is not working on the project until he gets clearance from the, or for whatever reason he opens up again, we have time for this. I mean, it would be something if all work is stopped right now and that, that he's just not doing anything. Does anybody know that?
Well, I just don't want to spend 50 grand to do a stormwater deal and then find out that they're going to through with a bulldozer and change it to what they want.
Well, that's where it has to be coordinated, Jim. There's no question about it.
We're going, let me provide a little insight.
Damn, Fred, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
If we knew or Chris knew that there was going to be a possible addition, why wasn't this cost included in everything?
No
Can I go
idea.
back to the previous question here that we were starting to go back and forth with about Chris working, and then I'll come and deal with yours, Steve, so that we can keep things in order. I am told by Chris that they are working, and they're working remotely and in a combination of social distancing in their offices. The responses that Chris has provided are that he needs to come out and do tours of the facility, and that he's not been able to do because of the stay-at-home order. Now, all of that stops effective as soon as they lift this stay-at-home order, if that's next week or not. But he says he's working on this thing, and that the big part of the work he's doing right now is coordinating the efforts of the mechanical contractor who's doing the detailed design work. Chris's work in parallel is that he needs to start getting these two other pieces of work, the geotechnical and the stormwater, done. So that addresses your questions. Steve, you asked me a question about why wasn't this included in the original 675, and that's the question I asked Chris. And he said that normally this stuff is separate and it's normally treated as separate. My concern on that was that why, even though Chris mentioned it, it was very, very late in the game when this was brought up. It was only brought up one time at that last meeting, right as we were going into the school closure. So that was my concern. And I've raised that concern inside the renovation committee, and we've not had an opportunity to get responses back from everybody on that committee.
So that's what scares and concerns me, is based on my 10 past months of experience with Chris, is one thing kept leading to another. One thing kept leading to another. And next thing you know, our expenses kept going up, up, up.
Well, I'm just surprised that after 15 or 20 years of looking at this project, it hasn't come up in the past.
There has been no question that this has been a needed service. You can't do the job without this thing. The question is who pays for it.
Right. And here's the problem. And I had this problem last month, and I guess, Tim, it's probably directed to you. We have a contract that I agree 100% this has to be done. before we build. I mean, and probably before he gets too far, because part of that is soil testing to find out how far down you have to go and what kind of footer and some of that information. So I get all that. The difference here is we're paying him differently than he normally would collect. He normally would be collecting a percentage after the fact. Because of our long history, we've come up with this different plan in paying for it. So I can understand, that it's different. The problem that I have is it should have been included, because this is different, when we went to all the school districts and asked permission to do that. So my question for Tim is, if we choose not to spend this money or go back to the school districts at this point, how far can he go with his contract? And in essence, what I see happening is he needs to keep going. Therefore, he needs to get this stuff ordered. And then this bill is going to come in when we actually build and go back to the school districts for the next portion. That's what I think needs to happen, but I don't know.
I think even before that, we need a quote from Chris of how much it's going to cost. I've heard from $5,000 to $50,000.
Well, we have quotes now, and he originally said it was in the $5,000 range. Now, depending on who you go to, he's got 2 or 3 quotes out there. That's where he's got one that he even recommended from the email. But I guess the question still comes back to Tim. What happens if we don't move forward or don't have full agreement on this?
Well, I think at this point, we need to go back to Chris. I think these quotes should have been included in the original 675. I mean, if he needs this, his obligation was to provide us a plan that got us to the point where we could go back to the districts and say, okay, here's the plan. And that was our understanding. I don't think this is correct that he should bring these 2 things up at this point in time and ask for more money. You know what? I think it should be included as part of the 675, and he can pay them. And if we have to pay him in addition later in time, we'll deal with that later in time. But his obligation was to provide us a plan that we could go back to the districts and say, okay, here's the plan. Now he's saying that he needs geotechnical and stormwater in order to get the plan completed. Well, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm sorry. So I think that we need to step back with Chris and say, you know what, that wasn't what you told us you were going to do. And to change the plan now, we went out to the districts, we got all the engineering money for this in order to have a plan. And I think that we need to push back on Chris Coughlin and say, guess what? We want the stormwater, we want the geotechnical, we're going to include it in the 675. And if we approve the plan after that, if there's additional costs, we'll deal with it at that time. That's my opinion.
Can you write a letter to that with that opinion in there as our opinion?
Yeah, I can do that. And I actually think that maybe Fred and I should have a conversation with Chris before I would write a formal letter to him to that effect, in order to keep the good working relationship going with him. But I think that's ultimately, if I have to write a letter to document the understanding, I will.
Is everybody okay with proceeding that way?
That sounds like a solid approach to me. I would have asked him to get involved at this point anyway, because we've already asked Chris to absorb that and his response was no. So we're going to have to escalate it, and we want to escalate it as slowly as we have to preserve the relationship, as Tim just said. I'll get with Tim on the side, and I'll provide an update to the facilities committee about this is what we're doing, and we'll continue like that. And I'll provide another update to the JOC.
I'm good with that direction.
One other thing, Fred, as long as you're talking to Chris, get a revised time schedule based on what's been happening and how he's working. Like to see what this means.
I'd be happy to, John.
Hopefully in the next couple of weeks we can get to some accuracy with that. Right now, everybody's still guessing, but hopefully. Any other questions on the stormwater or this engineering, or any other comments or discussion? If not, let's move on to the real number 8, financial items there. Had time to look at your reports there. Terry, you need to add anything to any of that?
I don't believe so. I tried to show you the March side by side with the February and March, excuse me, side by side, so we didn't have to add more pages to the agenda to present those separately. So where there is not a report, it just will skip. Like, for example, we didn't cut any checks from the Capital Projects Fund or things of that nature. But yes, there's really nothing extraordinary on these reports. It's pretty much business as usual in terms of the activities.
Is there a motion for 8G?
This is David. I make the motion.
This is John. I'll second it.
Any other discussion?
What was it? H what? Or 8 what?
8G.
Oh, well, let's go up to 7C. It says motion to approve operating section of agenda.
Move down one more section. Remember, there was 2 8s. So there's 8G is motion to approve financial items section of agenda.
Well, I question the whole thing goes back in 1D. We approved the agenda already.
No,
We approved an errored agenda.
No, we motion to approve agenda. Doesn't say anything about an error. It just says item number 1D is motion to approve agenda, period. We
yeah,
just-
well, this,
we just
Jim, this
approved the
item's on the,
agenda.
this item's on the agenda.
But we approved the agenda. So why are we
Yeah.
approving it again for each little item?
No, you're misreading it, Jim. It says motion to approve the financial item section of the agenda.
But item number 1D says motion to approve agenda, not except for 7C, 8D, or G. It's to approve the agenda, which is everything.
Just the form of the agenda, Jim. It's the form, the information that's contained in the agenda. The purpose of that motion was to determine whether there's any additions or changes to the agenda.
Then
There
it
were
should-
no,
Then it should state that as a fact rather than motion to approve the agenda.
okay.
We'll see if we can dress that up for next month.
Jim, this is Fred talking. Just a bit of a reminder here. We went to a consent agenda by section and we agreed as a JOC, that's how we were going to conduct our business. And so we agreed as a JOC that we would provide these motions for each major section and vote them as one major piece.
Well, I'm sorry, but we superseded that by 1D. And I won't say anything more about it.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Yes, Mr. Mahoney,
I approve, yes.
Mr. Dinsmore,
Yes.
Mr. Buxby,
Yes,
Mr. Olsmanik,
Yes.
Mrs. Brink is absent, Mr. Rickrode,
Yes.
Mr. DePlacido,
Yes.
Mr. Consilas absent, Mr. Ring,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now we're moving on to section 9, human and quality resources. Do I have a motion for D? Motion to approve human and quality resource section of the agenda.
I'll make the motion. Mr. Rickrode.
Steve O'Donnell, I'll second.
All right, how about any discussion? And I think I saw Natalie there. Do we have any questions?
Sam, I have a question. It's a good question, actually. How did we
We'll decide that.
get, how did we get Mr. Tracy to rescind his retirement?
You can actually thank the state for that because they extended his Act 48 period, so he didn't have to retire. So
Okay, great.
they extended that for another year. So he came to me as soon as that came out and hoping that you will let him rescind it because we were pretty excited about that.
It sounds like good news.
Very good news.
Thank you.
Wasn't there something that said that once you turn it in, that you can't rescind it?
In terms of, once you give a date, no, but the board can move to accept his resignation. If you didn't want to, there's nothing in the contract that says you have to, but you can rescind, accept the
Okay.
fact that he wants to rescind it. And that would be
I
the
thought-
motivation.
I thought for maybe financial purposes or planning, that once somebody turned it in, it was more or less permanent and we couldn't do anything about it, but obviously not.
John, that could be the fact if they're already starting to collect their retirement, a year later or something like that, it might be more difficult then. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. Tim said, I agree that it's related to PSERS, so what you're thinking about, John.
Yeah, and he did not follow through with that process because I would have had to send his final information, which isn't even collected yet because we haven't given them final pay yet. So it
Okay.
doesn't bother that.
Okay.
Dennis is a comment. If we don't vote for him to rescind it, we can say, no, he can't, but because he already did that, but we have the option to do either direction. So if you vote for this, you're okay with it. If you're not, you can vote against it. That's the reason we have to vote for it.
Correct.
Is that? Okay.
And Natalie, I had a question earlier that I think I got the answer. The motion C2 on the hiring,
Yes.
this RCTC instructor, that instructor had already taught some classes, correct?
Yeah, we caught Cotton losing that March meeting, and we lost our PA state inspection instructor, found another one, and he taught classes that we already had scheduled. So, what that motion is for. Plus, when we get back up and running and we want our seniors for state inspection, if that other instructor is not able to do it, I need the ability to have this guy be able to teach our seniors. So I wanted to make sure that was in place so that no one loses any more than they already have.
Okay, so he's going to have to come back with another letter of retirement sometime in the future.
Correct. Tracy, yes.
Okay, so if he decides to do it in a year from now, because he doesn't have all of his qualifications met, then he can do that.
Correct. If you approve this motion, yes. It'll be a year from now, we'll be in the same boat.
Absolutely, that's what I'm thinking.
Right, but it gives us a year, especially with this situation. I started the interview process. I got through one interview, then they closed the schools. We had to put everything on hold. So it buys us that time to hire that employee in a much easier circumstance. If he does in fact not finish his qualifications, which he may if he wants to stay longer. I don't know.
Okay.
Any other discussion? If not, let's go ahead and have a roll call vote.
Mr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Dinsmore,
Yes.
Mr. Buxby,
Aye.
Mr. Olsnanik,
Yes, Dennis.
Mrs. Brink is not with us, Mr. Rick Road,
Yes.
Mr. DePlacido,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsella is absent, Mr. Ring,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Thank you.
All righty, that takes us to reports. Superintendent report. Do we have a superintendent on it that wants to report? Then going to the director. I think he's already retired.
Which director are you talking about?
That might have been painful, Sam. Easy. I have a director's report that I submitted. It's quite lengthy. It's 3 pages. I would, rather than go through and read the report, I would entertain any questions or comments that anyone might have.
It's the quietest everybody's been.
They're captivated with my writing expertise.
What?
I just have one question. I know that some of the schools received grant money as a part of the COVID-19 issue. Did the tech school get anything?
We did not try to apply for equipment money to buy computers for students because students had computing generally provided through their home districts.
Okay. I make a motion to accept the report.
I'll second it, Mr. Rick Road.
You guys want to hang on to those motions till we get the rest of the reports done, then we can do it all at once?
Oh,
that
sorry,
okay?
sure. Yep.
That way, Terry, she's getting writer's cramp over there doing them all. But solicitor's report.
No report.
How about principal? Anything more, Joe?
You have my report. You've read it. If there are any questions, I'll entertain them, but I'll leave that up to you guys.
Questions for Joe?
Joe, are you starting to think about graduation and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, I have. We've already put in place our thought process. We are going to continue with the May 27th graduation date. We're going to be doing this virtually. We have some special things we're going to be doing with newspaper ad that weekend. We're going to have a fancy insert, and that insert will be shared with the seniors through a mailing. So that's our plan right now. We don't plan on changing anything, even though some districts are entertaining going into maybe the end of June and July. Ours will be done on May 27th.
Steve O'Donnell here. Could you just briefly, high level, how are you planning on doing the graduation virtually? Just real quick, real high level.
Sure. I had the opportunity. My son played at Mercyhurst University, and they had theirs virtually, and they taped them, all the coaches, and so each coach was connected after their speaking engagements, and so that's what we're going to do. It won't be a live virtual. It'll be one of those tape delayed virtuals, but we'll share our thoughts with our teachers one by one, announce the students' names, and then go from there on that virtual process.
Thanks.
What format are you doing? A YouTube or what kind of format is it going to be on?
Dennis, that's a great question. That's why we have Jeff Smith in this place. He's going to help me do all this.
I've seen a few live YouTubes is pretty nice versus Facebook, but I think YouTube is more user friendly than Facebook because you have to join a Facebook. YouTube it's not interactive, although.
I'm going to let Jeff Smith make sure he guides me on this. I have a team actually with Lisa Scalise and Lisa Sorensen and Jeff Smith that's organizing this for me. So again, I guess I can tell you I'm delegating this one with a smile behind the screen.
Good luck.
Good job, Joe. Terry, did you get our motion and our second for approval of the reports?
I have down Mr. O'Donnell and Mr. Rick Road on that. Is that correct?
I believe so. If you gentlemen are still good with that. Oh, it wasn't O'Donnell. I think
It wasn't me.
was,
I don't care if it's me, but I believe it was someone else.
Mahoney, maybe?
Yeah, I think it was me.
Mahoney.
Mr.
Terry, it was
Mahoney
Mahoney.
was the first.
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you.
So is there any other discussion or questions on any of the reports? If not, let's have a roll call.
Mr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Dinsmore,
Yes.
Mr. Buxby,
Yes.
Mr. Osnanek,
Yes.
Mrs. Brink is absent, Mr. Rick Road,
Yes.
Mr. DePlacido,
Yes.
Mr. Kinsella is absent, Mr. Ring,
Yes.
Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
and Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Thank you.
So looking at the agenda, we've got 11 and 12. We got supplemental reports and information, and we got statute related business. There is a motion under F, although I don't see anything that we need to motion. Am I missing something?
No, there is no business for statute related.
All righty. And we've got no changes to the board action item amendments. There is a number 16 executive session, and I do not believe we need. It was there just in case we needed it for something. So we don't intend to have any executive session. I had one kind of question probably for Fred and Terry. It was a good question we just had about some of the grants, if we had received any grants with this. I guess one question is with ECTS, is there anything, any business contracts that aren't getting fulfilled that we're going to see a savings to our budget? Or on the flip side, is there something that we didn't anticipate that we needed to spend money on that we're going to have more expenses that we can foresee now here? Either of those?
The general rule is no one makes any more or any less than they would have had school continued as it should. And so we're not aware at this point of any changes or deviations. I'll let for sure Terry comment on that. I'm not aware of any right now.
I'm not aware either of anything. A couple of the contracts were set contracts for the full year, so there wouldn't have been any changes on those to begin with. So no, I'm not aware of anything that will be coming up in the next month or so to the end of June.
I know at our home district, we were able to renegotiate our transportation contract. That's why I asked that. Is there anything contract like that you may be able, to do anything about? But I know there's very few at this point. But is there any other questions or anything for the good of the whole board here that we need to discuss?
One of the items we talked about, and I don't know when, January, February, was we received a grant. I want to say $180,000 for security. Has there any thought been given to how we're going to spend that? I realize that practically we probably can't do a lot, but again, this is something that should be coordinated with Chris as opposed to something separate. We talked about a couple options. Is there anything in the planning that has been discussed lately on that?
This is Fred. I'll take that one, John. We continue to work with the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency on the grant you're referring to. It's about a Terry, help me if I need this, $230,000, $238,000, something like that. And the primary element in there is payment for an SRO and for the secure vestibule. We've talked through this with agreeing at the JOC and the Facilities Committee to move forward with the secure vestibule plan. We've already brought Chris Coughlin into that, and the intent is to be able to reuse that vestibule with the facilities renovation. So we're going to proceed with it because we have to have the money spent as part of the grant. Now, I will say that I came in and spent another half a day with Joe today, going back and forth with PCCD on completion or their final acceptance of set of changes for that grant application. And as of April 20th, one of the primary things that they've asked us to provide by April 30th was a set of bids. It's not going to happen. You can't get bids in 10 days. And so we're going back and forth with them. We've provided answers for everything that they wanted answers on, but we had several weeks go by where their system was down and they were thinking that we were doing, we needed to provide some answers that we didn't provide. And so I can show a time log and a communication stream with their grants officer where we worked for several weeks trying to provide these responses, and the system wouldn't allow us to input the responses they were requiring. So we're continuing to work with it. That grant's back into them officially today. And I've gotten acknowledgement from them that they're working through the questions. And as soon as they come back with an acceptance or a final saying of this, that we'll push back our timeline because our system didn't work, I've already notified Dell and Chris, we need to go out to bid on this thing immediately. And Chris's initial comment was that this is going to be, sort of delayed and take quite a bit of time. And I said, this has to be expedited as a highest priority. And the response I got back was, understood, we'll get on it. Dell, if you have any input, now would be a time to put it on.
No, that's my understanding, Fred. I had the same conversation with him and I came to the same consensus that he was going to need time to finalize the plan because they hadn't been working and that he would have to have time to get it out. I think he was estimating having something to bring to the JOC no later than the June meeting.
And that means he's not working on the big project.
Well, John, I don't think we know what he's doing, frankly, because I'm not.
That's what we got to find out.
Yeah.
We have to find out what his schedule is, what's going on. And the worst thing we could ever do is waste that money putting something in that we're going to tear out with the big project.
Well,
We just need to coordinate that. That's all.
That's been a big point of conversation and concern, and we've raised that in the renovation committee and at the JOC because of the balance here. The balance is they're not the PCCD is not going to allow us to keep that money on reserve. We have to spend it or lose it. And so
Shame on us if we lose it, Fred. And
well,
again,
that's the
it just
plan.
needs done. That's all.
Yeah,
It just
no,
needs-
that's not the plan. We're moving forward. We've engaged the architect. He's coming up with the bid documents. And so we're pushing as hard as we can. I don't envision us losing it because we can't do something.
Okay.
I think it's, you have a good, John has a good idea. I think, Fred, if you could maybe talk to the congressman and tell him that due to the COVID-19, could we extend our time frame for our grants? I think that's a legitimate request. So I think we should make sure we go down that avenue too. We don't want to lose it.
Well, I agree with you. And I've said something earlier about let's escalate, but not too fast. If PCCD comes back and says, it's irrelevant that our system wouldn't allow you to make the changes, then we'll escalate as it's most appropriate. And Tim would probably have to weigh in on that as well. But I don't want to come out of the gate swinging because that'll poison our relationships. We've got them moving forward right now. They've acknowledged they're looking at our materials and they're processing them. I don't want to come in heavy-handed right now, but I don't have any problem with getting heavy-handed if that's what the situation requires. So I think that's a good input, Dennis. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions and anything for the good of the order?
I had a quick question. So when, maybe I missed something, but we approved a budget to send out to school districts for them to approve. Did that, the process for that, what's the next step when it comes to that budget?
Terry, you want to explain that?
We're different than your normal school district because we have to have a resolution from each of your districts to accept the budget. And we just received all those back. So now the next step that we asked you to approve was to allow us to go ahead and file this with Department of Education as the budget for this next year. So that was why if you open the attachment, you could see each district's resolution and the approval votes for that resolution.
Okay.
7A3 is where we approved that tonight.
Gary, all sending districts don't have to approve that, correct?
That is correct. They don't all need to approve it, but we've been very fortunate for the past several years that all have approved it.
Okay, just the way you said it, it sounded like all districts had to approve it, but only the majority of the districts have to approve it.
That's correct. It needs approval from the districts for it to be accepted. Yes.
Thank you.
Hearing nothing else, we didn't have dinner tonight, so I got a couple homemade pies, but I haven't figured out how to send them virtually, so I guess I'm just going to have to eat them for all of us tonight. So I do apologize for that, but I would.
Yeah, I seen your wife on saying that you had a lot of extra donuts and stuff.
Yes,
I was in there yesterday, Sam, and you didn't offer anything to me.
That's right. Well, I'm worried about y'all, so that's
I had to buy my own coffee.
It's a terrible problem. At any rate, that takes us to adjournment number 15. And I think we don't have to have a roll call for this. If you don't want to adjourn, then what happens is you just stick around.
Well, I'll go to adjourn. Just raise your hand so they can see it in the picture.
Is that right, Tim? Are we okay with that?
I think it's adjournment by acclamation, and it's a wonderful good night.
All right. Thank you all for doing this. We'll plan on doing this again next month, unless, of course, everything's back to normal. But we'll see about that. So thank you all for being patient and helping us get through that. Thanks, Jeff, for setting it all up. And thank you to the administration for keeping going here. So.
Jeff, I have one comment to you. After we moved me around a lot, that my space button wouldn't work anymore, so I had to go push the mute button